if the US government bans TikTok, it won't be a free speech issue, but it will feel like one. At risk of stating the obvious here, Black Lives Matter, Donald Trump's rise to power, the Arab Spring, a change in the United States youth's perspective on the Israel-Palestine conflict, the Me Too movement would just not have been possible without the internet. It's debated, but I really believe that it would not have been possible. Maybe you identify with one of those causes, or maybe you've just heard of them. But the important thing to know is that these are real movements. They created real change that were given traction by the modern era of social media dominance over traditional media, the era of user-generated media. If you identify with one of those movements, I'd be willing to bet that you feel like the thing that enabled those movements was freedom of speech. Social media is supposed to be the ultimate form of freedom of speech, right? You can talk about things that traditional media would never talk about, right? Well, if you believe that, I think you'd be wrong. And I'd also be willing to bet that you know that you're wrong. You know how people go on TikTok, for example, and say unalive instead of kill, or lay dollar bean instead of lesbian, or pew pew instead of gun, for fear of getting banned or for fear of getting their content taken down? Well, we have labeled those weird terms that we use online as algo speak. Is that your free speech? I sure hope not. Well, you tell me, that's pedantic, Austin. The point here is that we are going to talk about things on these social media platforms that traditional media would never talk about. Even if I'm getting moderated, every single other person on traditional media is out of touch, and these conversations have created these other movements. And I think you'd be right. The reason that Black Lives Matter brought awareness to police brutality, the reason that Donald Trump was able to connect with the American working class and brought awareness to a set of populist issues that are more important than we have ever seen before in generations. The reason that more American youth are aware of the Israel-Palestine issue than ever before is because social media is the modern rebel archive. The archive by the people, for the people. It is the formalization of folk tales and the distribution of folk tales that has never happened before in the history of mankind. Maybe through music, maybe. Posting to the internet is the first time that the average person, though, has had the ability to reach the entire world with their message without traditional middlemen standing in the way. But here's the problem. There are still middlemen. They're just not as visible. And I think that they're a lot more insidious. When you talk in algo speak, you're acknowledging that middleman. When your video gets deranked on TikTok because you just joined the creator program, you're acknowledging that middleman. When you blow up one day on TikTok and then flop the next, you're acknowledging the middleman. When you build your FYP brick by brick, you're acknowledging the middleman. When you spend 40 hours a week online, you're acknowledging the middleman. When you have brain rot, you're acknowledging the middleman. And who is there in the middle? The algorithm, hence algo speak. So many people acknowledge the positive nature of TikTok's algorithm. It's more edgy, it's more permissive in certain ways, it's more vibrant than, say, Reels. It's more eager to surface unknown creators than other platforms like YouTube. It's better at targeting than pretty much anyone else in almost scary ways. So many people love the way that the algorithm facilitates discourse, but almost no one talks about the way that the algorithm affects discourses, changes discourse. You kind of see glimmers of that discussion when your favorite creator isn't getting views anymore, right? Maybe they got views one day and not the next. Maybe you'll catch glimpses of it if there's mass hysteria about a Stanley Cup and everybody goes and buys one. The algorithm has a point of view and it controls what you get to see. The algorithm is not neutral. And that goes for Insta and X and YouTube and Facebook as much as it does for TikTok. But the danger of social media is the perceived freedom of speech that is actually just an illusion of freedom of speech. Algorithms flatten discourse to the extent that the algorithm elevates novel and contrary viewpoints, and if it ever decides that it doesn't want them, it will stop. Algorithms don't care about you. In fact, most of the time, they care about a bottom line. And in the worst case, they care about a particular agenda. Like, for example, you know how your TikTok For You page was just suddenly inundated with TikTok Shop videos a couple of years ago? That is editorial decision-making from TikTok. That is a decision that they have made to make more money and change the algorithm to surface it. Not because you wanted to see more TikTok Shop content, but because TikTok wanted you to see it. The algorithm is not neutral. And so, with the latest TikTok ban inbound, the discussion around freedom of speech has popped up again, right? The US government is controlling what you're allowed to see, right? Wrong. The US government wants to limit the ability outside of the US to control the way algorithms affect discourse. And the US cannot control discourse. It's the First Amendment. And in general, I want to tell you why that is, why I think it's a good thing, and why the current regime would mobilize around this issue of TikTok despite its unpopularity. But in order to do that, I need to tell you a little bit more about the First Amendment before we go on.
Hey, I'd like to remind you all that the TikTok ban isn't actually just a TikTok ban. The bill that allows the US government to ban TikTok in the United States, TikTok's just the start. This is just the beginning. HR 7521, aka Protecting Americans from Foreign Advisory Controlled Applications Act, doesn't just ban TikTok. TikTok is just the example they're using for what they can ban. Basically, the entire bill states that if a foreign company outside of the United States is operating an application or website within the United States, and the United States find them to be operating in some kind of unlawful way, that the company must stop operating unless the company sells the website or application to the United States. This is not a ban. This is the United States trying to consolidate power in media.
The first thing you need to know about the First Amendment is that it is a tactical idea about something that is a means to an end. Now, that doesn't mean that free speech isn't a right idea in its own, in itself, but the whole point of the First Amendment is to make the United States a more powerful country. The radical idea of the First Amendment is that democracies are stronger when there are more diverse opinions shared in the decision-making process of ruling a nation. Freedom of expression is not just something that is supposed to make you feel all fuzzy inside because you're special and what you say deserves to be heard. It's to ensure that the diversity of ideas in a country continues to exist, and so that America continues to exist. One of the most profound things that I ever came across was a podcast and some research about the structure of the First Amendment and how it is like a poem, and that there's meaning in the structure of the writing itself, right? So if you read the First Amendment, it starts out with privacy. That it starts out with something that allows you to come up with ideas on your own, subscribe to religions where you can source the ethics of those ideas, be non-religious and have your own set of ethics that you ascribe to things. It allows you, it provides you the privacy to develop an idea as an individual, as someone who's unique. Speech is only the second part of the First Amendment. The idea being that when you have an idea that you think is good enough and that you're proud enough on your own, you start to develop that idea and share it with those that are closest to you, your friends, your family, maybe a small group or a small community that is like-minded, someplace you feel safe to. But that the government cannot restrict, that you are allowed to test your ideas against a small audience. That is the point of freedom of speech. That's it. It's really not that profound. The third part of the First Amendment is about the freedom of the press. Once you've come up with an idea on your own, once you've shared it with a few other people and refined it just a little bit, You then bring it out to the press, to put it on a sheet of paper, to put it into a video format, to distribute it online, to put it into music, and then distribute it out. The point of freedom of the press is how an idea travels across the country. The role of the press is to spread ideas and information across society. That is really what we're arguing about when we talk about TikTok. You can say whatever you want, whether TikTok is banned or whether it isn't. You can go to your friends and neighbors and say whatever you want. You can record any video you want on your iPhone and post it pretty much anywhere else. But the real question of the First Amendment when it comes to the TikTok ban is the ability to share that video out, to share it with more people, and to have someone else take that, make a copy of it, and deliver it to another person. Distribution. It's that third key step in the First Amendment. Privacy, speech, press. There's something interesting here, though, which is in the fourth step of the First Amendment, which is assembly. The idea being that when a good idea makes it out to the public, when enough people agree with it, there's an assumption that politicians have also seen it, right? Maybe you've brought the idea to them directly, maybe you've called them, maybe you've petitioned them in some way or another. That is what the freedom of assembly is. It is the ability to come together and demand something of the government now that the idea has been shared by an individual to their friends and to the press, out to society. There's a secret fifth step that I don't think is explicitly mentioned there, which is that if the government doesn't enact the idea, they are at risk of being voted out. There's a way to remove the people in power if they're not listening to the ideas that are shared across a society. And so, when it comes to TikTok, this is like the singularity of the freedom of speech debate. If the point of the First Amendment is to say that people can share information and then vote people out of power if they do something unpopular, isn't it surprising that politicians would do something so unpopular when their jobs are already constantly on the line? I mean, the whole goal of a politician is to constantly do things that are popular, right? Now, some people have said that the TikTok ban is an attempt to stifle radicals in the United States. But if that's the case, why isn't there an X ban? Why isn't there a Facebook ban? Why isn't there a Instagram ban, right? Well, it's because the First Amendment, again, this being the singularity, protects those companies. It allows them to say what they want and do what they want when it comes to speech. These are American companies. And once a company is in America, the government loses control over what can be said. The argument just doesn't pan out. On top of that, having a foreign adversary control an algorithm that dictates what the discourse actually is on a given platform is a scary thing to me, at least. And I think it should be to you too. No matter how you feel about our ability to affect our government, the reality is that we do have more ability to control our own government than we do a foreign one. In a democracy, we are all responsible for what our government does. That's a scary thing to hear, I know, but it's true. Maybe you've been told that you don't have power. In some ways, that's true. But ultimately, you do have the power to vote. You do, right? And you have the power to organize. You do, right? Would it be hard? Is it fair? Absolutely not. But you have that power. You don't have that in China. We don't get to decide if China goes to war with Taiwan. We do have say in whether America goes to war with anyone else. And if we do go to war, Zuckerberg's family lives here. Musk lives here. His company and his wealth is tied up here. If things really do go downhill, these people that are Americans are much more likely to protect your interest than the Chinese government is. It's just how things go. But if the purpose of free speech is to help us make better democratic decisions, to share ideas that can be brought to the government and petitioned, isn't it a bad idea to let an adversary control the medium through which speech is distributed? The TikTok ban, in my eyes, because of that, is not a free speech issue. It is a national security issue. And I think that gets mixed up in a discussion about like personal data security. That is part of the thing. I think that's really a lower priority overall than the national security problem of letting a foreign government control how the conversation happens. How is such a powerful thing in any means. In general, I would say, who cares about America's commitment to free speech if America doesn't exist anymore, right? Here's another thing. The American government doesn't control the media. They can't. That's what the First Amendment is designed to do, to prevent the government from controlling speech in the media. But there is a deeper issue here that permeates both American social media and TikTok. And it's all about who does control the media. Do you have a guess? It's corporations. It's capitalism, right? Private media control. And so if the government doesn't control the media, there's only one place for it to go, which is private. Remember, I want you to think back to how we discussed how the algorithm isn't a neutral entity. Well, this is the dirty truth of the algorithm. It's designed to addict you. It's designed to keep you coming back. It's designed to keep you on as long as possible because that is how it makes money. Algorithms are designed most of the time, especially in America, to make money. The government doesn't control the media, capitalism does. And so the algorithm decides who can say what. For example, the algo speak stuff. It tells you what words you can say and what you can't, what topics are taboo and which ones are not. But it also determines who gets heard, right? We talk about marginalized communities being heard more on social media. I think that's true as it is, but we have not reckoned with the power that the algorithm has as the middleman in this case. And while I don't think any of those nefarious things are even happening right now, including on TikTok, when the algorithm is optimized to make money, it does some really corrupt things, right? I think the best example is the TikTok shop thing. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it really showed just how much TikTok is just an advertising platform. It's just a way to make you understand something else, to advertise a concept, an idea, a product, whatever. That's also why America's scared of it. Now, that is not true of everything on the internet, and it's true to varying degrees. The problem is that the web and the internet started out as a way to put the power of distribution, put that power of the press into the hands of the people again. That's what original websites were. But that began to change with Google, in many ways the first algorithm, right? It began to change with Facebook's newsfeed. It began to change with YouTube's algorithmic recommendations and Twitter's For You page. That early promise of the web of speech still exists. For the most part, you can say pretty much whatever you want on your own website. But the freedom of reach does not correlate there. There is not necessarily the same type of ability outside of these algorithmic social media platforms because they're just so good at taking our attention. And so I know this video is not going to change anything, but maybe it'll make you think about it differently in the way that you consume media, that when something is served to you, especially when it's TikTok and it's such an easy slide in, the first thing you see on TikTok is a video playing where you have no choice other than to open the app. The slipperier that slope, the less intention that you have in the way that you consume things. And as such, the less intention that you have in how you view the world, what you are in control of, what you are interested in. The paradox of the algorithm is that it shows you what you like, but the problem is that a lot of times we're not challenged by what we like. We don't grow from what we like. We grow from things that push us, that push our boundaries. And the only way to do that in these platforms is to either go seek them out or to happen upon them because they are rage bait, for example. They're good algorithmic pieces of content. Either way, the relationship that you have with that content being controlled by someone else, what you see and when you see it, is a scary thing to me overall. And that goes beyond the TikTok ban. So, I rarely have call to actions in my videos, but this time, if you're interested, I'm over on Mastodon. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening on decentralized web platforms. And I know that maybe you're pro crypto, maybe you're against it. The only thing that this means when I talk about this decentralized social media is that it is media owned by people, right? It is owned by more local control. The distribution is more local than it is centralized. And it is a little tiny way to push back. Now, is it as interesting as TikTok? Absolutely not. If I'm looking to kill time, I'll go to TikTok, right? But is it a slower, more human pace where I feel like the general quality of content is better? I think it depends on what you're looking for, but it certainly feels more human, and I like that I have direct control over it. So follow me on Mastodon. I'm at mastodon.social/AustinHaw, maybe /@AustinHaw. But that's my form of Twitter. If you're interested in talking to me, that's a great place to talk to me. But to wrap things up with the TikTok debate, really, I think where you should land, whether your feelings about the TikTok ban probably boil down to whether you think the US is worth saving. I just so happen to think that it does. Maybe that's naive of me, maybe that's too patriotic, but I think that the way we've set up our democracy has a lot of flaws, but I think that it is headed in the right direction despite a lot of what the discourse currently says, that the structure of power by the people for the people is a noble goal that we do continue to strive towards and have made progress towards very slowly over a long period of time. I cannot say that about other places, and that's no shade to any other country, right? I don't have any hatred towards it, but I do think that we have a right to question where that power and authority comes from and where it goes to. And that goes for countries abroad. But I think that it should also be a wake-up call for us to also be critical of our leaders and our business people internally, like Mark Zuckerberg. It's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down and will go down soon. But more importantly, ourselves, our relationship with media, the way that we choose to seek out differing opinions and fold in the things that come from people that we despise the most and take what is good from them and leave all the rest, but respect their right to have that opinion nonetheless. That's a truly American idea. Anyway, sorry to bring you down this deep rabbit hole. I'm so glad that you're watching with me, and I really post this video coming back into the new year mostly to have a conversation. So please tell me where I went wrong here, what I am missing, what your concerns are that I have just entirely missed. But I hope that I've laid out the boundaries of my version of the argument well enough for you to understand. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
So it doesn't matter, right? Because the United States gets to control the narrative. They want to ban TikTok because they want to buy TikTok so they can control what you see. They want to control your data, your information, your voice. This is not about protecting Americans. This is about consolidating power. Do not let them. But we don't really have much of a choice, do we? So good luck to us. Let's go.